tell you what. So you want me to describe the city to you or what I like about the city, or how do you want to do this?
Yeah. Talk about both and then say this or that, like the pros, the cons, and then your decision.
I work and kind of real close live to both of these communities, so I know them very well. Drive through Elk River frequently, Rogers frequently. I do business in both cities. I would say if you were looking for a city with a small town feel, but yet close to the Twin Cities, it would be Elk River. It has an old, like, kind of charming downtown. One of my favorite restaurants in the Twin Cities, Daddy-O's, it's up there. Used to be Little Brooklyn over in Brooklyn Center. They moved up there. So I meet some of my buddies up there, my brothers sometimes up there for lunch. It also has a newer amenities on the other side. And their sports teams are really still coming together. Football and basketball and all these teams are really, really starting to shine. It's becoming a shining city from an athletic perspective as well. Now, as far as cool things about that town, they do have the North Star, if you're into going downtown, runs right through town. They have all the amenities, modern stuff that you'd want to see up there. And then there's quite a variety of housing. So from the older existing charming stuff to the newer mid-priced, and they even have acreage. So if you want to have a fancy house out on a golf course or, live on 10 acres, that all can be accommodated in that town. Price ranges are still affordable as well. So Rogers?
You're a Rogers guy?
You know what? I like Rogers. Rogers, I jokingly used to call it the truck stop town because when I first started working out there, all it was the happy chef sitting out there in the corner and all the truckers that would stop on their way into the cities to regas and have lunch or whatever, breakfast. I've been selling in Rogers for over 20 years, mostly new construction. So I started on, and I don't remember what the name of the development was, ended up in Edgewater when I was finally up behind that Vite up on the hill up there, the fancy development. There's a whole nother episode I could talk about that, how the developer failed and everything else, but sold a lot of houses in Rogers over the years. It's a great value, and it's very hit or miss. It was very, interestingly enough, back in the day, not so much today, but back in the day, it was very like hot or cold based on gas prices. So people that didn't want to commute wouldn't go as far as Rogers, but people that wanted to be just a little farther out of the city hustle and bustle, Rogers has the same thing. Charming city, charming downtown. Granted, there's a freeway running through the middle of it, but that's okay too. It just brings a lot of commerce to the area, brings a lot more, cars driving by to buy their widgets and keeps those stores and business up there to easy access,
So if I was going to buy something more in the $1 million range, which city do you think I should go to?
Elk River. Just because I think that buyer, the amenities that they could, or the lifestyle that they could achieve with that, with, more acreage or being on a country club kind of a, vibe, or the golf course, I should say, those are easier to attain in that area. Now, Rogers, what's cool about Rogers is you start getting towards the south end of Rogers, kind of towards that Hassan and, I forget the name of the little town, Fletcher or whatever it's called right there. That side of, you're 5 minutes out of Maple Grove. You just go right down the back roads and you're right to Mama G's in about 4 minutes, and then right into all of that modern North Maple Grove. So it's actually pretty accessible to two cities. So if you like to shop and you like to be a little closer in, I'd suggest Rogers because there's a lot of beautiful homes in both cities. And I really don't have a preference because I don't commute. So I would probably just as soon be a little farther up and go into Elk River. But if I was a commuter, I'd probably place that home in Rogers, because I also hate this. I'm not trying to be in the middle, but I actually like both cities pretty darn equally.
You're not going to get in trouble this way, Andy.
Well, no, Rogers got itself in trouble a few years ago. I don't know if you guys ever heard about that. They were giving out a bunch of TIF money. They were giving like the Dairy Queen like $400,000 to build a Dairy Queen up there, and they wanted commerce. So they started really heavily, like Cabela's and everything. Everybody got a little handout to move up to Rogers, and they got in trouble over time over it. And then that whole regime that was in there got wiped out, and they replaced everybody. And now they've kind of cleaned it up, and they're not handing out so much money, but I don't remember all the details. You could probably Google it and find it, but forefathers of the current administration were trying to get the commerce there to make it more than a truck stop town. And that's what they did, at the expense of all that extra taxpayer money to get them there. And like some people are like, why should I pay, to have a Dairy Queen here? You probably wouldn't have had a Dairy Queen there or the hotels that are there or the restaurants that are there if they didn't have that money available.
It was incentive to get those businesses in town.
Right. And it created a town and literally turned it from a truck stop to a town.
The people's problem with it is in reality, what they do is they just reduce their property taxes for a certain amount of time and or have zero. But the problem is that these companies are still using city services. So they're costing them money and not paying any money. And that's where people have the problem.
Well, yeah. And when they're not paying money, it actually put the burden onto the homeowners because the corporations that normally generate a lot of taxes were not. So I don't know if we're quite at that 20-year window yet, but I think it was like a 20-year window where they were forgiven and now they are kicking in. And so now I don't know. It'll be interesting to see if they can stay afloat, some of those businesses.
Yeah.
You start adding 50,000, 40,000 a year in taxes onto a business, that takes away all their profit real fast and makes it maybe not as exciting to stay. Anyway, that nothing to do with housing, but it's a real situation in that area.